Hello and welcome to the podcast According to Sci-Faith, where we discuss topics revolving around the compatibility of science and faith. I'm Joshua Göcking and you're listening to According to Sci-Faith. Episode 35. What comes after the particles? So if you know about fractal structures, then you might have seen something like the Mandelbrotmenge or the set, Mandelbrot set, it's in English. If you don't have, then I encourage you to just Google it and look at it, and you will see that those are structures where the more you zoom in, they will continue to repeat. So repetitive structures, the more you zoom in, they will repeat. And this goes in this mathematical structures, this goes up to infinity. However, such structures can also be observed in nature. One example would be the fern, basically this plant that you can see usually in forests, where you have these leaves, and if you zoom into these leaves, then you will see this leaf structure be repeated on and on and on until at some point it breaks down and it goes over into a cellular structure. So it is not like in a mathematical way that it is repeated ad infinitum, but to some degree it is in there you can see it is similar to this. It is a fractal structure. However, it does not go on forever this way, but at some point just you will see cells and different structures. But not only in the living nature, in the biological nature, this happens, but also in physics we have this. So you might have asked yourself sometimes that, we know from maybe high school physics that we have atoms, and in those atoms consist of a nuclei, and those nuclei again consist of protons and neutrons, and maybe you have even learned, those protons then consist of so-called quarks. But maybe you ask yourself, but what happens after the quarks? What comes next? What's the next level? What's the next lower thing? And does it continue this way on and on and on? And the fact is, or as far as we know, if you look deeper into quarks, what then happens is that you will see further quarks. So similarly to these fractal structures, the closer you look into the quarks, the more quarks you will see. So you will see quarks, and then you zoom in and you see more quarks, and so on and so on and so on. So it's the structure keeps repeating itself. And the question is whether this will continue to go on forever, like with these mathematical structures where it really does continue to go on like this forever, or whether it is like other cases in nature like the fern, where at some degree it breaks down and some other structure occurs. So this is the question, and just to give the answer away right here, the answer is we don't know. We don't know yet. There are different theories, but we just don't know. So as I told with the fern, this cell structure at some point will appear, and therefore this repeating structure will disappear. And in particle physics, it's not the case that it is exactly the same all the time. So if we look deeper into the quarks, if we zoom in further and further and further, it is not the case that it is completely the same all the time. It might look the same, but it does not necessarily behave the same. What is meant by this is that some natural constants are changing there. For example, the charges will be changing there. And mathematically, this can be described, or the reason mathematically seen, the reason is that this occurs, so basically in mathematics, or in the mathematical formulation of particle physics, this occurs basically because there are in particle physics theories, which is quantum field theory, there are infinities occurring. So if you try to compute some amplitudes, you don't need to understand what those are, but if you try to compute some results there, then you will have infinities occurring, and this just does not make any sense. This cannot be. Infinities in nature do not occur. So either the theory is completely wrong, or you're doing something wrong, and it turns out the theory might not be complete, or this might be an issue, but you can save it if you do some mathematical trick, and this is to absorb these infinities into the natural constants that you have there. Of course, by doing this, you lose something, because now you cannot predict these natural constants from the theory anymore, because you use them to absorb some infinities. However, other than that, is really useful and is a really powerful tool for describing the physics at the quantum level. Okay, time for a short break. And as I do it usually in these breaks, I want to give you some insight into my latest novel, Alien Thoughts. So let's listen in. Outside, a fresh breeze blew in her face. After all the time spent in perfectly air-conditioned offices, this air was welcome to her, and she decided to walk the way to her apartment. She left the campus, walked past the bridge, and enjoyed the view of the Heidelberg Castle for a moment. It was particularly accentuated by the rays of the setting sun. Above the castle, on the Königstuhl, the radio towers could clearly be seen. These were already there before the new order was established. Since then, they served for the thought control of large parts of the Rhine-Neckar region. Spellbound by today's particularly beautiful view of the castle, Patricia overlooked a pedestrian who was coming towards her and bumped into him. She was startled when she saw his furious face and was frightened for a moment. Immediately his expression changed, and with a friendly smile he apologized and asked if everything was all right. She answered in the affirmative and continued walking across the Neckarwiese, the meadow at the riverbank. For this man, the situation must have been such that after she bumped into him, he got angry and wanted to yell at her. He came to reason and decided to remain friendly. In fact, however, this was mind control by the AIs in action. In a fraction of a second, the AIs had recognized the emerging thought of anger, and by deliberately playing in deceptively real alien thoughts, they convinced the man to remain friendly. Only when one knew about these mechanisms, as Patricia did, it became noticeable in everyday interactions with people. So in this short excerpt there is this mind control which this book is about, shortly described. So if you found this interesting and want to learn more about how this works, how this whole world works, what's happening there, what's the story behind it is, and what will happen in the end, then I encourage you to get the book. You can order it on Amazon as an ebook, and I really would enjoy it if you would read it and also give me some feedback on it and write a review. This just helps other readers to get to know the book and get to see if this would also be something for them to read. If you now want to understand what this all means physically, then you have to look at this in this way. So we said we look deeper into the quarks, and then we see more quarks and so on, and we go closer, and we will always see quarks. So those are all quarks. They all carry, let's take it, a charge. Let's take the electrical charge just as an example. They all take a charge. So what this is basically, what you basically, if you are on an upper layer, basically would see is the charge, the sum charges of all these, the aggregated charges of all these quarks, from which you most do not see, but only see if you go closer. And so, in some sense, the actual charge of the quark at the ground level, if there is one, this does not continue to go on into infinity, but if there is one at the core level, then this is basically covered by all these other charges. And this, therefore, the natural constants change. Therefore, the charge is different the more you zoom in, because then if you zoom in more, then quarks who were before covering this charge are now, you are beyond them, you passed beyond them, and now the charge changed because of that, because this charge is not affecting you anymore, and so on. So therefore, these natural constants do actually change. So this is the physical interpretation of this mathematical way, which is, by the way, called renormalization, which is a really important instrument and tool in quantum field theory. And this scaling of these constants is also called the renormalization group. That's what is called. So, however, considering all this, it could still be that we could at some degree get to a distance where, like at a fern, this breaks down and a different structure occurs. For example, string theory assumes that at some degree there will be strings. There won't be these particles anymore, but there will be one-dimensional strings. So this would be a completely other structure that occurs there. However, it could, of course, also it could also be that this pattern continues ad infinitum. So actually we do not know. But to see this, to get closer to what's actually at a particle level occurring, we need to look closer to see whether this structure at some degree changes. We need to look closer and closer and closer. And looking closer means smaller distances. And in particle physics, smaller distances means higher energies. And therefore, this is the goal of particle colliders, to resolve this. And therefore, they are most of the time trying to build ever larger colliders with ever larger energies. We had an episode about this before, if you can remember, where we also looked at some critique of this. But this is basically the reasoning behind it, that the more energy we put into these particles, the closer we will see those particles, and then we can basically hopefully at some point distinguish whether this pattern just goes on and on and on, or whether a different structure will emerge. So I think in this effect of these fractal structures that are also occurring in nature can also be interpreted in the spiritual, because in Ezekiel 10 it speaks about wheels that are within wheels. So there you also have this, basically the structure where wheels are in wheels, and I guess in those wheels there again will be wheels. So there's also this fractal structure which keeps continuing, and this just shows the eternal depth of God, the infinite depth of God. And what you can also see there is that if you look at the example from quantum field theory of particle physics, where we had these changes, we had changes in the natural constants due to this covering of the charges and so on, and so the deeper we went, it was similar, it was basically the same, but it was also something was changing, something was different. And I think it's the same way. The more we get to know God, the deeper we get, and things in some degree remain similar because it's God, he's eternally deep, but it's also in some sense different because we get to know him better. We get a deeper knowledge of him, we get a deeper revelation of him, and I think that's what he wants us to do. That's why he reveals this in nature, that just as we in particle physics have this urge to look deeper and deeper and deeper into these particles and see what's beyond that, what's even beyond that, and how the constants change there. Just like that, God wants us to get to come closer and closer and closer to him, to get to know him better. And as the Bible also tells, that the Spirit it goes into the deepest depths of God, that he wants to take us with him there, that we get a revelation of God that is deep, a close revelation of God, and that we can carry that into this world, and that we can just see him as he really is, and get this intimacy with him that he wants us to have, and that was, if you just look at the biblical narrative, was his his basic or his foundational intention with us, that he wanted people he can relate with, that he wanted people he can have intimacy with. So this is basically his longing for us, and this is also therefore our purpose. And I think this is also revealed in nature, that he calls us deeper to him. So that's everything for today's episode. I hope you liked it and you enjoyed each part of it. If you want to get in touch with me or discuss a topic or want to give me some feedback, then feel free to contact me using the contact form on my website, sci-faith.de/en. And there you can go to the contact tab and contact me. And if you have any other things or episodes you want to have covered there, or topics you want to have covered, feel free to contact me there. Also, if you are not yet familiar with the format in which this podcast is produced, let me just briefly explain it to you. So there is always at the beginning of a month or of a block, there is a big block of 4 episodes in one thing. It's kind of like a preview, which I call it, where you have the next 4 episodes all in one episode together, combined. And this is for people who like to hear long format podcasts, who have a long way to work or something else, where they can listen to a long episode and can then have a preview of the next 4 episodes all at once, and are completely up to date from the beginning of the block. For those who like their episodes shorter, who prefer it if they have a half an hour or even less of a podcast episode, for those there is every week afterwards will appear a podcast episode almost in that length, and this way I can publish every week a new podcast every episode, and everyone can have it his own way, either once a month a long chunk of content, or once a week a shorter format podcast episode. So I think that's the best way for everyone, and also for me when I'm producing it. Please also note that this is an independent podcast, which means that it is recorded, produced, and marketed by me. So I really need your support in this. So if you like this podcast, then give it a 5-star rating. And if you have the time, even write a review to it. This just helps other listeners to become aware of this podcast, and then people who might be interested in this content can become aware of it. Also, if you have friends who you think would like this content, then recommend it to them and share it with them. Also, you can support me in other ways, for example by reading my blog and subscribing to my newsletter, or even by reading my books, which you can find on Amazon. For example, there is my latest novel out now is Alien Thoughts, which is pretty entertaining from the feedback that I gotten, and so it's also in some way related to science and faith. The topic of it is also in there, but of course you can also read the book to this podcast, Sci-Faith, The Compatibility of Science and Faith, which is also available in English since last year. Thank you for that, and now I wish you a wonderful day, and I'm looking forward for you to tune in again next time.